When I am riveting a set of bumper covers together, I try to keep my rivet as close to the corner as I can so I can provide the most amount of clamping force towards the outside of the seam. It just makes the panel look a lot tighter when riveted together. To do this, I have to come in at a little bit of an angle to get the first hole drilled. After I get the hole drilled on the other side, I'll come back through it from this side and just really quick run my drill through that hole. This will make it so that my rivet goes through nice and straight, and when I rivet it, it's really tight. I didn't go step by step to show every step of the nose assembly. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. You just put the two ends together. There are a couple of things, you know, like keeping the rivets close to the edge, which keeps these seams nice and tight. That is an important one, as well as making sure your corners are lined up and making sure that the back panel is either slightly lower than or equal to the height of the top of this panel. The last thing you want is this thing sticking way up there and catching stuff. You know, you get up underneath the car and it peels the fender off. You want that seamless, smooth transaction. Also, when you're going through and you're setting up your lines, one good helper is to either lay a piece of tape in the corner of those and make sure that both corners stay flat. Or I go through sometimes if I'm struggling with the nose, and I'll put some marks on it just so I know that they stay lined up correctly, and you know, you can see that little bit of a shift. But we've got the nose and the fenders together. I'm going to go ahead and set it on the car. There's a couple different ways that you could go about setting these noses on here, putting these noses on. You could put them on 4-inch blocks. You could put them on ride height blocks. Or, you know, in a situation like this where it's got a splitter where I don't really want to travel into it, I don't have the luxury of a tall valance to get that height right. I've got to be pretty close on it when the car is in travel, which means the cross member's down, the car's hunting, it's, you know, under its full load in the center of the corner. That's when the valance is going to be its lowest, and that's what I need to make sure that we're not, you know, into the track so hard that we cause the car to shear in the middle because he doesn't have weight on the tires. If the nose is on the ground too hard, it takes the feel out of the wheel. It takes the weight off the front tires and allows the car to push, so, or forces the car to push. So we need to make sure that height is really close, or, you know, exact. To do this, I'm going to set my car on basically travel blocks. So I'm going to put a 5/8 block under the cross member, and that's going to be basically my target max travel. And then I'm going to go ahead and put the back on travel blocks. Basically in the back I take, you know, 1.5 to 2 inches out of the back height, knowing that, you know, the track that we go to, we see quite a bit of squat in the back on landing. You know, you can leave that up a little bit, but the higher you leave the back, if it does travel, you're going to have some height under that valance. So knowing where I'm going, knowing where, you know, our travels are going to be, I'm going to put the back at -1.5 from our, you know, our static heights. By setting the back of the car down, not just the front, you ensure that, I mean, if the back of the car stays hiked up, it's awesome, but if you lose any rear height, it just kind of clamshells the front of that, and the valance is way up. So by taking that into account, we're going to be right on our splitter. Some noses, the older ABC nose, you have a taller valance to work with, or you kind of get into the nose, you grind that nose away a little bit, so it's not as important, you know, being exact on where you're at. Where with this, having kind of a splitter design, we got to be right on. So like I say, by putting the car down like this, we can anticipate it more. Another thing that I'm going to do is Don't set your tires, if you're doing it this way, don't run your tires at your 1828 or 1525 max pressure. Run them down. In fact, I'll run my fronts down to about 3. What you got to do is understand that getting down into the corner when that tire sees load, that tire is smashed. So basically the hub height to the surface of the racetrack, that distance is shorter. If you air it up all the way, it's going to be considerably higher. So it's going to feel like the car is up into the fender when it's just down in travel, when it won't be that way when the tire is actually smashed into the racetrack. So I drop the air pressure down and I look at where the actual patch of the tire is. And you basically want to put that outside sidewall right down on the ground just to kind of mimic where that tire rollout's going to be. Same thing with the left. You know, it's going to get smashed in, not quite as much as the right front, but it is going to get smashed down. So make sure you look at where the tire is actually landing and air that tire down to where it's, you know, kind of an anticipated size of, you know, where it should be when it's smashed into the racetrack. When rehanging a nose on an existing body and you don't pull the windshield out, make sure you go back and you tape all this stuff up. These corners will gouge, scratch, and just screw the Lexan up and the A-post. So just go throw some tape on that and you'll be good. So now that I've got it on blocks, I've got the window taped up, I'm pretty much ready to go. The car owner actually supplied a bumper. It was the bumper that was on it. There was nothing wrong with the bumper. The nose got damaged. You usually don't see that. Usually if you're going to put a nose on it, you're putting a bumper bar in it. So I'm a bit spoiled on this project. I'm going to get the bumper installed where it needs to be. I have not cut out for the bumper bar center yet. I'll get underneath there and I'll show you guys how I do that. I use a hole saw rather than a grinder. I know some people use tin snips or a grinder. That's a mess. I'll use my hole saw. I'll show you guys how to do it. So I'm going to get this installed, get it to the height that it needs to be, and we'll be ready to slide that nose on there and start working the back of those fenders in. If you've got adjustable aluminum tubes for your front bumper to help adjust the height of it, it's a great addition. It's really, really nice because if your valence is on the ground a little bit, you can put a couple turns in it, raise it up. Or if your valence is a little bit high and it's not getting down, you can put a couple turns in it, lower it down. These are really nice. A lot of guys use like aluminum clevis or aluminum rod ends. Make sure you use really good anti-seize. This is copper anti-seize, and I use this on everything. If you've got aluminum tube and aluminum heim, you've got to use good anti-seize, especially if you try to adjust it at the track. The ductwork, the brake ducts, all that provide a lot of resistance, so you kind of have to crank on it a little bit, and it's really easy to gall these together, weld them up, and then they're not adjustable at all. Even on trailing arm brackets, that's another huge point where those aluminum tubes fail. Make sure you get a good anti-seize and be liberal with it. Don't be afraid of it. That's great for this, long life, easy to adjust. You never have to worry about it. Put it on the first time, never worry about it again. So I'm here ready to cut out the inside of this nose. I'm using a 2 1/4 inch hole saw. I was going to use my 2-inch, but I couldn't seem to find it. So I'll be using the 2 1/4. And basically the goal is to get it right up in that corner. You want to take as much right out of the front and right to the top without going through the actual front of the bumper cover. Here's the outside where the bumper cover goes. You can see how tight it is right up underneath there and right tight to the front. That'll give us a really good mounting surface. And what that's going to do is if this is left really, really long, when you rivet it next to it, it sucks it way down. It leaves a raised little lippy looking thing there. Now that I've got the bumper bar in, I've got the nose roughed into where it needs to be. I put some big lead blocks down here to kind of help hold everything in place. That nose just kind of wants to move around. We don't have any fender supports on it, so it's not really held in place very well. So I did do a little bit of roughing in back here. I know I'm going to have to cut quite a bit out of there, so I just removed enough to where I can kind of get the fender into the rough place that it needs to be. It still needs to come back a little bit, but until I continue cutting there, I really can't do much more. Same thing over on this side. I've done some rough trimming just to get it where it needs to be. You can see a couple of holes developing in my tape there. That's exactly why I say, I mean, I just chunked through 3 layers of tape that easy. So I'll go ahead and put some more down, but if I didn't have it, this would be all gouged up and just wrecked. What I'm going to do in the next kind of time lapse, I'm going to go ahead and finish these up. I'm going to start cleaning these up, start trimming them, marking them for my final cut. And before I cut them, I'll show you how I mark them all with tape. And then it's just a matter of trimming, sanding, and then attaching. We can rivet the nose to the bumper bar, and once that's all finished, we can go back up on stands, because I'll know where everything needs to be as far as height goes. Then we can start on ductwork, fender supports, hood fitment, and then attaching, you know, everything, locking it down. To mark where I'm at on these edges, I take a full width roll of duct tape or a different color tape that's the same width as my masking tape, and I basically make a mark around it. Now when I set my fender over it, and I know that my fender is exactly where I want it, I line up my tape and it tells me exactly where this line needs to be. This one runs right down the edge of the door top, so I know where that intersecting line is going to go with this line that ran right against that body line, and I know, like I say, the width of the tape offsets that, so I know exactly where to cut. Alright, now we're ready to trim, and you're probably going to say, but you didn't quite cover the line all the way. Yes, when I ran the edge of the tape against my body line, I ran it on the top of the body line, and this distance right here is just enough for me to lay flush against the body line and not sit on top of the corner of it. So basically I left a 1/16 of an inch, less than an eighth, and you'll see after I get this cut out where it's going to lay down there. I went through and I put arrows on this. I do this all the time, even when I'm not filming a video, just so that I don't cut on the wrong spot, because there's no quicker way to ruin a fender than to cut in the wrong area. When I cut this, I'm going to leave it just a little long. I'm not going to take any of that tape off of there. My plan is to cut right on the outside of that line, and then when I'm done, I can go back with my sandpaper, sand it all out nice and smooth, and it'll be a perfectly flush fit. Alright, so there's our initial trim. We got definitely a lot of cleanup to do, some grinding. We're having a little bit of a hard time getting this one back all the way because it is hitting right there. So I got to do some cleanup. I got this little handheld belt sander thing that works awesome for that, plus some hand 80 grit sandpaper. But yeah, that's a pretty nice little cut. So like I say, using that 2-inch wide tape around it and using that to mark off of is always a really easy option for these. And as long as you got a straight line and as long as you know how to put tape down, it gives you just a perfect outline. Here's the other side. Again, it is a little short right here on the front. Missed it just by a tick. But everywhere else, whew, it's money. It looks a little goofy now with all the tape on it, but I assure you, once we get the tape off and get it riveted down, it's going to be money. This is El Beastie, little handheld belt sander. This is great for getting those edges nice and flat, so they're not kind of wavy from trimming them out. So yeah, I'll go through and belt sand this baby up. Same with that other side, and we'll be ready to rivet this thing up in no time. And there it is. There is our finished cut piece. We are ready to start riveting her down. That's a pretty decent fit right there, I would say. Here's the left side. Again, pretty decent fit. The door did change a little bit on the edge of that, but I think it's more because the cowl isn't sitting correctly. So I think when I move that around, that'll fix itself. When I'm attaching the door to the cowl, and I know that my fender's got to sit over it, if I was to put rivets down, it would leave it kind of humped up and it wouldn't sit flush. So what I'm doing here is I'm using my countersunk drill bit, my countersunk rivets, and basically I located a couple of holes. I'm countersinking them. Countersink them a little bit heavy, knowing that it's a hem there on the top of that door. And then when you put your countersunk rivets, you can get these on Amazon. I just picked up 1,000 of them from Amazon, and it's kind of hard to see, but they're just a nice little countersunk so that it sits flush. And I keep them out of my normal door line of rivets so I don't drill back through those. I just put those right on the edge. It holds everything together. They sit flush. You'll never even know they're there. When I'm putting skirts on down the side of the door, I'll do the same thing when I attach my door and my fender to the actual skirt bar before I put the skirt over it, and that'll keep my skirt from getting this little whoop 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 down the top. Alright, well, welcome back. Where we left off yesterday is I had the nose in place. We had done some trimming on the back. We had got those roughed in. But what we hadn't done is we hadn't set the nose side to side so that we could get the hood right. Now, just like the bumper bar and a lot of the parts of this, I'm just putting the fascia on it, basically the front bumper cover. We decided to put a new set of fenders on just because, new season, make it crispy as well as the doors. But really, the other stuff wasn't that beat up. This is a brand new car. It had just gotten a little bit of damage. We're just trying to pimp it out a little bit, right? So the hood was already fit, and I had to get back to that exact same spot. So the first thing I do is I get the back roughed in where I want it with the existing bumper bar, so I know the length is right. I got the wheel wells correct, and I've got the rough shape of it. Then what I'll do is I'll put the hood on it. I'll line up the back where it needs to be. I'll tape it down, and then set it down in place in the front, and then move the nose around side to side. So I'll move the nose side to side to get it to where it lines up correctly, and you can tell off of these corners. I did have to move it to the right a little bit, which made me have to shave just a little bit off of the back side and off the front side of this one here. I had to do a little bit of work right there, as well as the back side of that one, just to get those correct, because I was off by about 3/8 of an inch. Now that I've got it centered up and my hood is fitting correct, I'm ready to rivet everything down. When I got those located, I did sink the rivets in the front bumper just to keep it from moving around anymore. Unfortunately, my phone battery was dead, so I wasn't able to record that. But like I said, we got the nose, we got the fenders in place, we got the hood on it. Anytime that you're hanging a new nose and you're not putting a new hood on it, you need to kind of go through this process just to ensure that your hood isn't all jacked up or off to one side and that you can reuse it. A lot of times when we tear the nose off of these, the hood's still usable, especially these newer lightweight hoods. You don't want to spend $700, $800 to get a hood, so you just tend to reuse them. This one was perfect, so I'm not going to throw it away, obviously. But when you're trying to reuse that hood, you got to make sure that it fits the old nose, and the best way to do that is to get it attached to the right length. Set it on there, take it off, set it on, take it off. I knew with my bumper bar that it was going to be really, really easy. So, like I said, I just kind of expedited it by getting it roughed in and then set the side to side. Now, if you look at it, it does look like it's just a shade off, but I think that's because the hood is actually, where the hood pin bar is going to be, it's kind of pooched up a little bit. That will clean up when I get it done. So, my next step is I've got to get the hood pin bar in it, get that set, make sure my templates fit correctly, and then I'm basically ready to go to the air and put my ductwork in, my brake ducts, all the rest of that. So here you can see where our seam was, how our seam is just beautiful, clean, exact, our hood corner, all that. But here you can see where I marked my offset for my rivets. This car was built with 1/8" rivets in the back and the quarter panel, so I'm gonna copy that. I'm gonna stick with those 1/8". They were 2 inches on center. So every 2 inches, I'm going to go ahead and mark it and put a hole. I've got them marked. Also, I'll go through and I'll have kind of a dummy piece that tells me what my back spacing is here. So it's right about 3/8 of an inch. The last thing you want to do is be able to look down this door and see the rivets all janked up and, you know, goofy looking. The first thing I look at when I walk up to a car is the quality and the craftsmanship, and the rivets really stand out. If there was rivets that were all misspaced, that's the first thing you notice. And if you see someone that's too lazy to pick up a tape measure and measure out their rivets, what else is wrong? Is the bump steer close? Is the caster close? The ride heights? The weights? I mean, this is a really, really simple technique, and it's really easy to tell the lazy builders from the ones that go that extra mile and make it correct. One more thing about rivets is a lot of times guys will use 3/16 rivets to put a car together. 1/8" rivets, I feel, they're quite a bit cleaner. They're a lot prettier. I prefer 1/8", especially on interior, on ductwork. Anything where there's 2 pieces of aluminum going together, I prefer the 1/8". Whenever you're going through plastic or fiberglass, it's more common to use 3/16. The reason being is that it's just so much stronger, as well as the length of it. Anytime I go through aluminum to aluminum, I don't use a backup washer. It's really needless because you're pulling on aluminum as it is. It's not like you're going through aluminum into fiberglass. If you're going into fiberglass, there's not as much strength there, so I always use a backup washer. If it's aluminum to aluminum, aluminum to steel, metal to metal, I can use a rivet without using a backup washer. Anytime that my lowest panel is anything other than metal, if it's plastic, if it's fiberglass, if it's some sort of composite, I always use a backup washer. Whenever I'm putting a car like this together, if you're going to use 1/8" rivets versus 3/16, you've got to keep those closer. 2 inches, 3 inches on center as far as spacing goes. If you're going to use 3/16, you could spread that out. You could go, 4 inches on center. I wouldn't go much more than 4 inches on center, just because then you have an area for kind of a gap or the panel to separate. It just doesn't hold as tight. But regardless whether I'm going into plastic, fiberglass, if I'm using a 3/16 or an 1/8", as long as it's not metal as my lowest layer, I will use a backup washer. In a spot like this nose where I'm going through plastic into steel, I don't use a backup washer. Obviously, you're never going to be able to get a backup washer in there to start with. Also, whenever I'm going through plastic into steel, like a bumper bar would be, I never use 1/8". I always use 3/16. This is just really weak. It's easy to rip these things through. The 3/16, yeah, they do have a little bit bigger head, but I do use the small head stuff just because for cosmetics, it just looks better than those big fat heads. But like I say, whenever I'm going through plastic into a bumper bar, it's 3/16. Now, when I go through the plastic into the hood pin bar, I can get away with 1/8". It's not really as much of a high contact area up underneath that hood. Also, the hood's got to sit on it. So if you use a 3/16 rivet underneath there, the hood will be kind of pumped up a little bit and it won't seal as well. Whenever you have it, something like this, I'll use an 1/8", and I'll kind of be able to pin that hood down against it and seal a lot better. Also, whenever I'm doing a rivet in an area like this, I prefer to use a countersunk rivet. You can do 3/16 countersunk, but again, the thickness of it is going to kind of hold that hood up a little bit, and it's not going to seal. 1/8" countersunks are great for areas like this, and you'll see when I put these in here after a while, they're small, they're dainty, they keep it flat, flush, and smooth. You can seal the hood down. Anytime that there is a gap underneath this hood, you're allowing air to pack up underneath there, and you don't have that downforce that you need. These cars are heavily reliant on downforce, so any of that downforce you could save is going to be a positive. That's why you see a lot of the super late model teams run tape around their hood. That just ensures that that thing is sealed up to keep all that air on top of the car as downforce and not underneath the car as lift. By measuring the distance from the center of my hole to the edge of my tape right there, I know that when I put my hood pin bar in, I can get this distance exactly where I want it, so that I don't have to worry about my hood not fitting or the seam not being in the right spot. As you saw in the time lapse, I was countersinking these so I could put these rivets in. Look how just absolutely perfectly flush they are. Those countersunk rivets are so nice, especially like on hood lips, hood flanges, so they sit flush. So this is what the hole normally looks like, and then when I go through and I use this countersunk, I just picked up this countersunk. It's a 3/8 countersunk that I got at Home Depot. There you can see the mark on it. Just give it a little whirl. I mean, really, it doesn't take a whole lot. Just like that. That's what it should look like. And then when you put the rivet in it, it sits nice and flush. And yeah, they're just, it's just really nice, really clean. Here we are with our right front template, and that has just got a great fit to it. This is what we call holding water. That is just pretty much a perfect seal on that template. I'm really happy with the right front. I am going to put a support on the inside of that fender just to make sure that it stays solid like that. The left front, however, is not as great. You can see that there is a little bit of a gap on the bottom, so I will need to bring the top of that fender up a little bit so it fits that template a little bit more. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put an inner support on the inside of this fender, and then I'll radius it with my shrinker and make a nice tight fit. We saw in the templates how this fender was a little bit low, so I'm going to have to bring this top of this fender up a little bit to seal it. But before I do that, before I start modifying this, I need to make sure that our centerline template's going to fit, and to do that I've got to have the air cleaner on, because the air cleaner usually sits up underneath that hood, the hood lays on it, and I just want to make sure that we have the top right before I go through and start messing with this. If I was to do this and then go to here, I may run into an issue with it not fitting the seam correctly, so before I get to this point, I've got to address that. I'm ready to build these fender supports for this inside of this left front fender. I use the same stuff that I use for roof rails. It is 1/2 inch by 3/4 inch, 1/16 thick extruded aluminum that I get from Home Depot. They come in like 4 foot long lengths, and it's perfect just to lay them down inside of here. I will have to shrink it, so I'm going to set up the time lapse so you guys can keep an eye on what I'm doing here. By using my shrinker, I'll be able to fit the same radius all the way down. I will not only support this fender, but I'll be able to get it up to where it fits my my template. Just like I did on that roof rail video, I'll start shrinking it. I'll do the whole thing lightly. I will have to put a little bit more right in the center to try to get that up a little bit, but just go slow with it. Be patient, and we'll work that thing right in. Now that all of our templates are good, we're ready to attach the cowl. We're ready to attach down the doors. We've got the nose riveted. Yeah, we're ready to lock it all down and then go up to stands. I'm really happy with the way it turned out. We've got a little tiny gap on the top of the left front template, but it's well within tolerance. Yeah, this thing's coming along pretty well. We're ready to keep moving forward on it. I hope you guys are following along. We're going to have this thing done in no time. When riveting panels together, let the panel stay relaxed. Rivet it from a relaxed position. I've had people push those things in, push on the rivet gun really, really hard and rivet it, and the panel stays like that because it misaligns those holes. Just make sure you're leaving the panel relaxed and let the rivet gun do the work. Don't try to force it. The customer supplied this 5-star ductwork. I am going to attempt to use it. I have installed one before. It was okay. I usually prefer just to build my own aluminum ductwork radiator shroud, but I'm going to give this one a shot. While I'm up, I can get the bottom of my doors attached. I did mark for my rocker panels while I was on the ground, so I can get those on. I do have to build a rear hood pin plate. The cowl was broken right here, so I'll go through before I get to that point. I'll show you what I got going on there. I'm going to build basically a little corner for that. Yeah, we're coming along. Let's get started on this nose. I will time lapse this. If I come to a point that I think I could use as a teaching moment, I will slow it down and walk you through it, but for now I'm just going to start cutting. Got the grill cut out. I use my little air saw on this. I do not use a cutoff wheel. That shit, when it goes flying, it's hot. After I cut it out, I went through and I used my 80 grit sandpaper and I gave it a nice smooth flat edge. Most importantly, make sure going this way that you don't leave like a little hook from that piece of plastic you cut out of there. Anything that disturbs the airflow is just not ideal. So make sure you smooth that out, and yeah, we're ready to start mocking up the sides. First thing I did was I built a cardboard template. I build a cardboard template in every new set of ductwork I build. The biggest thing is knowing the relationship of this surface to that surface and how to get there. So the height of this, the angle, the length there on the bottom, the height of the grill opening, the length of how far I need to go to overlap it is all important stuff. I can redesign the top however I want as long as I have those important factors. It's plenty long enough. It goes all the way back to the radiator, to the top and bottom corners. Now I can lay it over top of that plastic ductwork and get kind of a rough shape. I can kind of pick how I want it to go now. If I want to go farther forward, if I want to go farther back. I particularly want to go farther forward because I'd like this roll to be right at the top of the radiator. Yeah, I'm a little bit tall here, but that's also because I'm sitting on top of it down here. By the time I get this notched out, I believe it'll sit down far enough to where I can be really, really close, or I can make a small cut and you know, clean that up and get that to the top of the radiator where I want to attach it. So I think this is going to work out really well. Also, another thing is that I'm not going through that. That's not going to, you know, impede the side of my radiator. It's going to be a really, really good fit just about in that spot. I've got plenty of room in the front, and it's the right height. I'm good. I'm going to start do some rough trimming. I'm going to leave it a little bit long in case I screw up. But I chose to start with this left side for the reason of this is the bottom piece. The other piece would go over top of this. So I need to know where this is going to be located, and this piece will be in basically in its entirety before I put the right side in. It would just make a life a lot easier. So I'm starting with the left. Hopefully when I get to the other side, my template will work for the most part. Setting up the right side, I can do a little bit of trimming, set it on the right side, cut that one out, and I think it's going to be a pretty simple project. That first one went in pretty well. I did have to come back and find my 90, or actually how far over 90 I was, so that I could trim the top back up there. But that actually went in really well. I had to come back and do some notching for the seam, as you see here. But I was able to take my cardboard template, and with some minor trimming, it went almost perfectly in this side. So I made a couple adjustments to it, and now I've got my next piece marked, ready to trim so we can get it installed. Again, I'm gonna have to find the difference between this 90, either over or less than, so that I could get that back seam correct. And then I decided, rather than, typically I would just rivet from the top down on the top of that seam, but I think rather than doing that, I'm going to add a piece of aluminum, a 90-degree aluminum piece. I'll rivet it here, and then I can attach my ductwork to the top of it. The sides will stay in because they're actually inside of the radiator tank, up against the core. It's not touching the core. There's a little bit of room, but it's a smooth plastic edge, so it shouldn't, there will be no damage there. The bottom will sit flush when it's all done, and it's going to be a nice, I mean, yeah, I think it's going to work pretty well. To find square, what I'll do is I'll put my 90-degree carpenter square up against the radiator so I know that it's flush and I know that I've got a straight edge off of that. And then to the nose, it's easy to see that, what is that? That's probably about 3 inches. So we know we're about 3 inches at a square at the end. So I will have to take that into account when I'm trimming this top piece so that I know that I get it correct and it's not too short. To figure that, I'm going to have to lay my square in the ductwork and basically go to that same amount on this end here, which will leave me a spot so that I could make a line. I'm going to leave this line obviously a little bit long in case I miss it, but it's that simple. I mean, if you have that same distance here, this is the same length as the nose is, you're going to have the correct angle on this end. So we've got the right side in now. I went ahead, I marked my center line. I will have to offset it because there's like a bead roll recess, but it's all molded into the plastic right here. So we'll have to add like 3/4 of an inch on that strip on that side so that I can overlap it correctly. But I'm going to go ahead and yank this out. I've got to do some cleanup on this piece. I'm going to add that piece of aluminum to the top so that I can rivet this piece in and down. Then I could put this piece on, the right side piece on, get it all attached, and then I could put my bottom plate on. My bottom plate is kind of unique. It's got these kind of like, I don't know, little airflow channels on it. Make sure when you put that in, you put it in the correct way. Those are supposed to go lengthwise. You don't want the air traveling over the side. But yeah, so far so good. Keep following. I've got my piece on here, ready to go. I taped it in place so that it doesn't move. I pre-drilled it. I've got 4 holes in it. To drill into this radiator, the first core is down a little bit. So there's a little bit of a gap. There's about 3/8 to a 1/2 inch gap from the top of this to its first core. So we can utilize this front edge to rivet to, but just to be safe, I don't want to drive my drill bit in there. So what I've got is I've got this heavy aluminum plate. It's about a, I don't know, maybe 100 thou aluminum plate. I've got it set aside. I use these up inside of there, and then when I drill the front of it, I could hit this, and I never touch the core of the radiator. So I'm going to slide up underneath there and pre-drill these, but I've got to come in from the bottom. We are back today, and we're ready to seal this baby up. Yesterday, we were able to get the sides fitted, roughed in. This morning, I came in, I went ahead and get this right side locked down. It turned out pretty decent. That side does curve in because the plastic must have been, you know, when it was stored, it kind of had a little push down spot there. So, coming along nicely. We're ready to start fitting the bottom. One common mistake people make when they're putting fender supports in is they leave the adjustable portion of the rod too long and it sits way down into the base of these, which really limits the amount of adjustment that you have. When I cut them off at about 2/3 of the length where they're still open. They still have plenty of room here for adjustment if you're going to pull it out, but rarely do you ever shove these things way out. You know, you find out where they're legal, you leave a little bit of adjustment, but more so I like to keep them to where I could tuck them in when I load it in the trailer so I can get away from my cables and the wheel wells. So make sure that when you trim these off, they don't need to go any further than maybe 1.5 inches inside past your adjuster, past your lock. Anything else in there is just waste. When you set that fender support up, it should only be in about that far into the hose, so you have plenty of adjustment room. When you install your fender supports, make sure that you got them far enough forward so that when the tire swings forward, it doesn't hit it on, you know, normal roll through the pits. It kind of makes it a pain in the butt, but more so than anything, if these were metal rods, when the tire hit them, it would bend them and they would stay like that. Then it would change the location of your fender. These are plastic rods because we're planning on beating this thing to death on a 1/4 mile track. But like I say, just make sure, good practice, just to keep that tire from hitting on full sweep. Well, we got the sides in and the top in yesterday, and I've been working on this bottom, but it is an absolute nightmare to figure out how to film how to put this in from underneath the car. We do have a hoist, but I don't like using the hoist. I like having the car on jack stands. It's more comfortable for me. I can get all the way around it. As far as filming goes, it is a pain. But here we are. So I got the bottom in here, and I marked out for these lower radiator supports, knowing that I don't want to go over top of them. If I went over top of them, I would have a gap on the sides, and I would lose that air. These Ductworks have to be uber efficient. The more efficient it is, the more downforce is speed. So I cut it out to make it flush. I did drill a couple of holes in it to kind of lock it down. I have not finished drilling those holes. I want to make sure that I get it complete where I want it before I put any extra holes in there. So after getting the back locked down where it needs to be, I went to the front. Now you can see that gap where I'm trying to avoid with cutting out those lower radiator mounts. So I've got those marked, I've got it attached. Now I need to kind of rough mark where I'm going to be right here, as well as my seam there, so that I don't, you know, have it humped up. I did Sharpie in a line, it's kind of hard to see, which is basically a vertical line off of here. If I cut it right on that line, it would butt right up to my nose and I'd never be able to rivet it. So I'm going to have to account for enough of an overlap to rivet to. I will say a couple of the positives of using this plastic ductwork, this, what is it, the C5 from 5 Star, is that you could tin snip this stuff out really easily. It's easy to trim, it's easy to cut. I do use my stomp shear as much as I can to make sure that I have good straight lines, but you can tin snip through it really, really simply. Use your sandpaper to clean your edge up, and it looks really clean. This is one of my edges that I use my stomp shear on, and it's just a perfect edge. I went over it with some sandpaper, but even on the hood, on the top pieces and the side pieces, I did some tin snipping, and they turned out really nice with, like I say, the use of some sandpaper, maybe a straight file. There we are after I stomp sheared it. It does look like I got a little bit long on this side off of where my mark was versus this side. I know that I've got more than enough rivet room here. I will do a little cropping on these sides and some shaving. I'll set it up in there. One thing that I did was I centered it up, the center of my radiator and the center of my nose right off of here, so that when I go to relieve this, so that I know that it fits the nose correctly, I've just got to go right off the center there. If you've got it offset, you're going to have to mark it to make sure you don't chop out too much so that you have a hole there and you lose some of that air pressure. Like I say, lining everything up on center just makes life a lot easier. There is our absolutely perfect fit. It goes right to the edge of the nose where we wanted it, just so it remains as much sealed up as we can get it. It will rivet to the nose flange there for the ductwork. It's just a great fit. I'm actually really impressed with these plastic parts that came from 5-Star for a ductwork. Just like every other seam, I measured out my rivets. This one I actually took a strip of masking tape and I put it in the center of that cleco, all the way down to the center of that cleco, and this way I have a straight edge that I can drill off of. Plus I know that that's where my rivets got to go, so I just drill right off the edge of that and I've got a perfect spot to my ductwork side. There it is. All of our holes are pre-drilled all the way around. We are ready to pull this back out, got a little cleanup, and then we're going to install it for the last time. When putting skirts on, I marked it when it was on the ground so I knew what height to set them at. When I attached my door to the bar below it, I used countersunk rivets. The reason is that way when it goes over top of it, it doesn't stay all humped up over the rivet. It sits nice and flush and smooth. Alright, I got the rest of the rivets in it, and before I put the grill in, I went ahead and I taped the inside edge of this. Basically what I'm doing here is I'm just ensuring that it's sealed up really, really well. It cleans that all up, and then when you get your grill in, if your grill's black, it doesn't show, you know, like the white from the nose, black grill, white behind it. It just makes it look a lot cleaner when the grill is in it. Here's our grill. I've got the grill pre-drilled, ready to install, and I mean you can see that with the grill on it, it looks a lot better than had it been white behind there. There will be there's a little bit of white showing around the edge here. I did put the sticker kit on, knowing that it was going to wrap into the grill area. That would be really difficult to do if I put the grill in first. So I got that all in place. This little bit of white that is showing here will be covered by the grill. You might see a little tiny corner of it, but I mean by the time it's all finished, I'm also going to run another strip of tape around the outside to seal that grill even more, make it look a little bit cleaner. So here we are, we're ready to put the grill in. Pre-drill all your holes, cleco it all in, make sure everything fits first, make sure you got it in the right way. I've seen these installed upside down. I don't know how they do it, but I've seen grills put in wrong. It's pretty simple. Just if it doesn't fit, flip it over, try it again. Here we are with the grill clecoed in. You can see how much cleaner that looks being blacked out inside. But now I'm ready to start riveting it. I am using 3/16 rivets on these, and yeah, some of them you may not be able to get backup washers on. Get backup washers on as many as you can, especially the corner ones. Those are the first ones to pop out. But yeah, make sure it's clecoed in. Then you kind of start in the center with your rivets, and then I like to work my way to the edges. Just like I say, use as many backup washers as you can on 3/16 rivets. The centers of these grills where they're drilled are all a hem, so that means the material doesn't just go straight up with the screen behind it, it goes straight up, it flops over, and it's basically double the thickness with the gap of the screen in between. These edges don't have a hem on them, they're just open-faced where they've been trimmed out. So when you rivet those down, if you don't account for that, it'll be a divot, it'll be kind of caved in. If you put a washer behind the rivet, then the rivet through the nose, and then a washer behind that to lock it all together, you get this really, really nice, smooth. You can see where there's just a little tiny indentation there towards the center, but it's a lot smoother than had you not done that. Put a washer in there, and you know, I mean, maybe even 2 washers would be right without getting that corner all lifted up. Play with it a little bit and see what you think. One of the final things we need to do to finish this car up is trim the hood to fit inside the bezel line on the fender. To do this, I run a piece of tape down the edge of the fender line. Right there, you can see really, really closely that that's right on the edge of the recess for the hood. This is only 3/4 inch masking tape. If your hood hangs over the edge further, you need to use wider masking tape, like 2-inch masking tape. This right here is going to suffice because I've just got to trim the edge of it just a little tiny bit. Here you can see with the hood on it that I only need to take down about 3/8 of an inch, 1/2 of an inch. So with this being marked right on the edge of the fender where I need to cut the hood to make it flush, now I'll go back and I'll add another piece of tape over top that matches it, that has my gap offset on the tape, just like I did on the fenders, and that'll leave me a perfect line down the hood for it to sit seamlessly, a nice smooth seam. Now, as you can see, we got our tape down on the hood. We've got just enough of an edge there that'll allow us to lay side by side with that flange, not rub it, and look really, really clean. And there you have it. A perfect seam. Nice and smooth, air flows over it, not going to catch any air, not going to get torn up, just perfect.